Hey, folks, today's episode brought to you by one of our sponsors, my favorite one, sunsetlakesabbaday.com. Use the code LEFTISBEST. You get 20% off. What do you get 20% off? Well, you get 20% off their tinctures. You get 20% off their smokables. You get 20% off their gummies. You get 20% off the coffee. You get 20% off the fudge. All of their products are third-party tested. They have a tremendous amount of integrity in the way they farm. They use integrated pest management. They don't use any pesticides. They use regenerative farming practices, so they take care of the soil. They're also movement partners. These guys have donated thousands of pounds, like literally tens of thousands of dollars. Things like strike relief funds, to refugee resettlement, carceral reform, mutual aid work up in Vermont. They've done food pantries and Planned Parenthood and give directly. I can't say enough about this company. Mostly employee owned, $20 minimum wage when they do hire people to farm their stuff. Just a great company. sunsetlakesabbaday.com. Try their products. For me, my favorite, absolute fave, is their Goodnight Oil. I cannot tell you how it has helped my sleep over the past, I don't know how many months they've had that product, like 5 or 6 months, but it's been amazing. Check it out. sunsetlakesabbaday.com. Left is best. You'll get 20% off. Now, time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, August 23rd, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Kamala Harris makes history as the first Black and Asian female nominee of the Democratic Party. She accepted the nomination last night, touting her toughness as a prosecutor in a risk-averse general election pivot, emphasizing strengthening the border and the military. The DNC refused, I should say, to reverse its decision to not allow a Palestinian speaker on its stage, prompting widespread outrage and sit-in protests. More on that in just a bit. Polling shows Harris is doing better than Biden in Texas, cutting into some of that lead. Colin Allred spoke last night, too. Maybe they think they have a snowball's chance against Ted Cruz. Schumer indicates that voting rights legislation would be a priority under a potential Harris administration. The Fed has finally announced that they will be cutting interest rates. CNN reports children are drinking from puddles in Gaza as Israel continues to concentrate Palestinians into a smaller and smaller area. People should look up the Warsaw Ghetto. Like, we're in a very dark period with this. The DOJ has filed an antitrust lawsuit against RealPage, the corporate landlord price-fixing software company. That's good. RFK has filed paperwork to withdraw from the race in Arizona ahead of his appearance with Trump today. The Supreme Court rejected Arizona Republicans' effort to block 41,000 voters from casting ballots, but left the door open for future proof of citizenship measures. In Texas, trans teens can no longer change their sex on their driver's licenses And lastly, Ukrainian forces are expanding their control of Russia's Kursk Oblast. And Russia attempts to counter in Donetsk. And we just sent Ukraine a bunch of weapons as well. I'm hoping that this Ukrainian Kursk offensive is a leverage for peace. We shall see. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is Casual Friday, and we were gonna have Ryan Grimm on as a guest, actually. He had some flight issues, but at the end of the day, I also kind of wanted to just go through the Harris speech last night. Got to sleep on it a little bit. We're having a lot of people write in and saying how they didn't like the speech, and that was my reaction as well. But at the same time, it's not for us. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. It's just myself and my friend Bradley today, so say hello.
Hello, everyone. It's the only two left standing.
Exactly.
It's just me and Emma.
Just us. So we'll get to Harris's speech in just a bit, but wanted to play the speech that never was. Despite significant backlash from many members of Congress, I mean, even Jonathan Chait was tweeting, like, they should let a Palestinian speaker speak. We just, heavily edited, of course. And that was the case for the speech. It was supportive of Kamala Harris. It was just about highlighting the plight in Gaza and Palestinian identity in the midst of one of the worst crimes that we will ever witness in our lifetimes. I mean, gosh, hopefully. But it's one of the worst crimes in the history of humanity. I mean, they're committing genocide. So with this being such a salient issue for so many voters, it was a major misstep and strategic mistake, in my opinion, not to give a voice to a Palestinian. And the uncommitted movement has just been resoundingly reasonable throughout this. This ended up being a symbolic ask because it's separate from the substantive arms embargo request, which was not agreed upon. Sam and I have been saying that that's probably the most likely outcome, that Harris doesn't want to give a firm commitment on an arms embargo before getting into power. If she does it at all, I think she could be pushed in that direction. But even when they didn't get that met, they just said, okay, we're not getting the substantive concession. How about a symbolic one? And they refused to accept that. And I mean, they even watered down the symbolic ask. The first request had been that Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan, who was a doctor who worked in Gaza, speak at the convention. Now, that would have been seen as too divisive, maybe too illustrative of the actual realities of the genocide. As I just headlined, children are drinking out of puddles, and polio is spreading throughout Gaza at this moment. Then they pivot, okay, how about just a Georgia state representative, someone who's supportive of Kamala Harris, but who has a Palestinian background? They said no. The pressure campaign continued yesterday. Mother Jones published the speech just to show how how anodyne it was. And still, they did not concede. Now, outside of the convention, protests and ramped up. The Georgia State Representative Ruah Roman gave the speech outside the convention hall to other supporters of Palestinian human rights. And then last night, she was on the Native Land podcast, which Charlemagne is one of the hosts, or maybe he was a guest. I'm not exactly sure.
This might have been a crossover between the two podcasts, because it seems as if the Native Land is Angela Rye, Tiffany Cross, both formerly of MSNBC,
right,
and Andrew Gillum, who we obviously know is the former Democratic nominee for governor against Ron DeSantis.
I was not expecting to see Andrew Gillum.
All three names shocked me, actually. I was like, right. Oh my, whoa. And then Charlemagne is here, as well as a few others, I think, from the Breakfast Club.
Right. So they invited her on. Kudos to them. And she gave the speech in its entirety. Let's play that for you.
And tonight joining us to talk to us about this really significant movement around Palestine is Georgia State Representative Ruah Rahman. And we wanted to invite you on first to share a portion of your speech that you were going to share had you been given the opportunity to address the platform at the DNC. So we'd love for you to share that and talk to you a little bit.
Yeah, so the speech is actually very short. We were not very greedy in our ask. Unfortunately, that's just the way things go.
How much time did you ask for?
I mean, originally we asked for 5 minutes, and we got back and were told keep it down to 2. So we did. We tried to work in good faith. The whole point was to bridge the gap between what we were seeing between voters and the party.
Yeah.
We're not here to party poop on anyone's party. We really just wanted to be able to walk out of here. Again, we came with a policy ask, but we said maybe we can at least get a symbol.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we didn't get that.
Well, I'm thankful for you to be here. And, I have to say, when we were leaving last night and saw and heard the cries of the protesters, it really hit home. My dear friend Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote a wonderful piece in Vanity Fair. I hope everybody reads it. But we are honored to give you this platform tonight and would love to hear your speech.
Thank you. My name is Ruah Rahman, and I'm honored to be the first Palestinian elected to public office in the great state of Georgia, and the first Palestinian to ever speak at the Democratic National Convention. My story begins in a small village near Jerusalem called Suba, where my dad's family is from. My mom's roots trace back to Al-Khalil or Hebron. My parents, born in Jordan, brought us to Georgia when I was 8, where I now live with my wonderful husband and our sweet pets. Growing up, my grandfather and I shared a special bond. He was my partner in chief, whether it was sneaking me sweets from the bodega or slipping a 20 into my pocket with that familiar wink and a smile. He was my rock, but he passed away a few years ago, never seeing Suba or any part of Palestine again. Not a day goes by that I don't miss him. This past year has been especially hard as we've been moral witnesses to the massacres in Gaza. I've thought of him, wondering if this was the pain he knew too well. When we watched Palestinians displaced from one end of the Gaza Strip to the other, I wanted to ask him how he found the strength to walk all those miles decades ago and leave everything behind. But in this pain, I've also witnessed something profound. A beautiful, multi-faith, multiracial, and multi-generational coalition rising from despair within our Democratic Party. For 320 days, we've stood together demanding to enforce our laws on friend and foe alike to reach a ceasefire, end the killing of Palestinians, free all the Israeli and Palestinian hostages, and to begin the difficult work of building a path to collective peace and safety. That is why we are here, members of this Democratic Party committed to equal rights and dignity for all. What we do here echoes around the world. They'll say that it's how it's always been, that nothing can change, but remember, Fannie Lou Hamer shunned for her courage, yet she paved the way for an integrated Democratic Party. Her legacy lives on, and it's her example we follow. But we can't do it alone. This historic moment is full of promise, but only if we stand together. Our party's greatest strength has always been our ability to unite. Some see that as a weakness, but it's time we flex that strength. Let's commit to each other to electing Vice President Harris and defeating Donald Trump, who uses my identity as a Palestinian as a slur. Let's fight for the policies long overdue, from restoring access to abortions, to ensuring a living wage, to demanding an end to reckless wars and a ceasefire in Gaza. And to those who doubt us, to the cynics and the naysayers, I say, yes, we can. Yes, we can be a Democratic Party that prioritizes funding our schools and hospitals, not for endless wars. That fights for an America that belongs to all of us, black, brown, and white, Jews and Palestinians, all of us, like my grandfather taught me, together.
That's beautiful.
Oh my God.
Absolutely. That's beautiful.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
for that.
sharing that. And I
Wanted to play that in its entirety, just to show she didn't say anything that should be perceived as controversial, but
Yeah, that almost sounded like a Reverend Wright sermon or something like that, with how caustic and volatile and but how inflammatory the rhetoric was. Saying yes, we can. What is wrong with her?
Yes, we can. We know who said that first.
Yeah.
The best friend of
That's
Reverend Wright.
So go figure.
These are the ties that you have to recognize, Bradley, if you're looking at politics. No, yeah, I mean it's unconscionable. I think Charlie Sheeher writes in that there's a Streisand effect here. That's also part of it. I think that cuts both ways, right? I think that the Streisand effect of highlighting suppressing Palestinian voices is also to appease the Israel lobby. Like, there's a part of that the Democratic Party likes. And that's a difficult thing to admit, but it's the truth. The fact that this is a headline gives the, I guess, liberal Zionist remaining coalition some sort of peace that the Democrats are not going to change course here. But you know my position. I think Kamala Harris has behaved largely rationally so far, and it would be irrational for her not to shift policy at all if she were to get into office, based on her own political ambitions. But for activists, and especially with the moment that we're seeing right now, the Wall Street Journal reporting that Israel is concentrating Palestinians into small areas and also starving them and not giving them clean water after destroying their facilities. It's reminiscent of the Warsaw Ghetto, where the Nazis concentrated Jews into an increasingly small part of the city, starved them as well, and then many of them were trucked to extermination camps after being concentrated there. This is the gravity of the moment here. And the DNC just was terrified of any display of disunity, and they valued that more than the highlighting a voice that would speak to the pain here. And I think that's a miscalculation and the biggest misstep that the Harris campaign has made thus far. However, what they're saying to themselves is that we don't think that there are enough people who are going to make this their singular voting issue, and let's be cynical about it and cold-hearted and stave off the AIPAC money in time for us to get into power. Because at the end of the day, this is why this conversation is just so agonizing to have within the context of electoral politics. Their number one goal at this moment is to get into power. And doing the right thing while you're trying to get into power, those two things, unless, we're talking about like the Bernie Sanders campaign, and that's not what this is. Those two things often come into direct conflict.
I just wanted to say that after watching it too, the Ruah Rahman speech as well as Kamala Harris's speech, is that, and also just taking in totality all 4 nights of the DNC, kind of my interest in what constitutes a big tent for them, that who falls under the big tent is like, never Trump Republicans who make it seem as if all of their other policy positions can fall away because they were horrified at January 6th and want to, so-called save capital, small d democracy, border patrol agents and law enforcement officials to kind of almost make it so that, Democrats aren't the scary crime party that, look at these guys in their uniforms and their big sheriff hats, like they feel comfortable saying Kamala Harris's name out loud. As well as the families of the Israeli hostages still in Gaza. That I understand some people obviously making the comparison of, like, of course, like, they're prioritizing that pain and that grief that resulted from something in the region, but will not do that for another group of people. But what I will say when it comes to that too is, the Muslim Women for Harris Walls, who essentially disbanded their chapter, in a statement, they basically said those hostage families almost made more of a plea for the violence to end.
That's been the case the entire time.
And that's what I think is so fundamentally jarring to behold, is like the cudgel of which the word hostages and those people's grief and their plight, how that is being used by politicians, when those people who are actually in it, whose kids are actually gone, they don't want more Gazans to be killed more than seemingly politicians in this country do.
It is absolutely no different than when Republicans in 2004 would trot out the family members of a deceased or a fallen soldier to justify their war on terror. I mean, it serves a very similar purpose. The fact that the Democrats are engaging in it just shows how we have a really long way to go. I mean, this would have been very easy for them to give her the speaking slot, but they chose not to do that, and it's disappointing. But as we begin to see, as we saw, I think, in her speech as well, the strategy is becoming clear that they are sprinting to pivot to the center at this particular moment.
And I read a quote a few months ago about the wet eyes of the sentimentalist from James Baldwin, and how that really grates at people who are actually living through oppression.
Mm-hmm.
That when good-minded people say how their heart breaks,
right,
and how it's gut-wrenching to see what's going on in Gaza. Because at the end of the day, sentiment is fine. But when you're saying it on stage in Chicago, while there are people outside who are literally sitting on the ground, almost trying not to feel defeated because the people that are supposed to represent them, and not only that, the people who they want to represent them, but do not feel comfortable with that representation. They want to. They don't feel like they can enter that big tent. That's where the sentimentality it rings hollow. It almost means less than nothing at this point to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's also, you could invoke the MLK quote about the white moderate in that particular instance as well. So, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to break down Harris's full speech and some of the most notable moments. We'll be right back after this.
Hey, nobody has supported the show as long as Just Coffee. And right now, they're celebrating their anniversary, 25 years. Use the coupon code MR25. You will get 25% off of all coffee. I want to talk just for 1 second about food flavorings. When you get flavored coffee beans, they are not flavored with actual ingredients that you would keep in the kitchen. They are chemical flavorings that trick your brain into thinking they taste like holiday cinnamon joy or whatever it is. Do you ever wonder what's in those flavorings? Well, one of the ingredients, and there are a lot more, is called propylene glycol. Anything with an "ene" in it, you don't want to have in your body. Public health statement released from the CDC about exposure to propylene glycol starts out with, "This information is important because this substance may harm you. The effects of exposure to any hazardous substance depend on the dose, the duration, how you're exposed, personal traits and habits, and whether other chemicals are present." And then it defines propylene glycol as propylene glycol is a synthetic liquid substance that absorbs water. Propylene glycol is also used to make polyester compounds and as a base for dicing solutions. It goes on. The FDA has classified propylene glycol as an additive that is generally recognized as safe for food. Generally recognized. That's a pretty iffy statement, and I don't want to ingest something that is generally safe. I want to ingest something that is safe. And the ingredients in my coffee, I'll tell you what they are. I'll read them off. Coffee. That's it. Because I get just coffee.coop coffee. I get the majority report plant. Why wouldn't I? Do we have a bag with around? No. We'll put up a picture. If you need flavorings in your coffee, add flavorings yourself. Go get cinnamon. I don't know where you buy holiday joy, but go get the cinnamon. Add ingredients you know and understand. Don't let companies add them for you. Just Coffee has you covered with clean, great coffee. And just to let you know about this stuff gives you an indication of what justcoffee.coop is all about. They take care of their workers. Well, they're employee owned. They take care of their suppliers, the farmers, and they take care of the planet. Check it out. Justcoffee.coop, 25% off with the code MR25. Also sponsoring the program today, birthdays. Not actually birthdays, but birthdays happen all year. Which means there's probably somebody you should be buying a gift for now. What are you going to get? I don't know. Well, I got the idea for you. Aura digital frame. It is ranked the #1 digital picture frame by Wirecutter. They are super easy to set up. Aura frames allow you to update them. You can preload them with photos and gift messages. So it doesn't matter whether you're giving a frame to your sister or your aunt or your grandma or your cousin or your dad or your whatever, your mom. It doesn't matter. Your gift is going to be completely personalized for them. You can literally preload this thing. You don't have to take it out of the box. All you need is an app and a Wi-Fi connection. Super easy. I can pop a picture into my Aura frame for my sisters right now, from right now where I'm at. They got a lot on there. But the beauty is they come with unlimited storage. So all you need is the app, and you can upload as many photos and videos as you want year round. This is super great for people who are a little technically challenged. Right now, Aura is having the very first friends and family sale. We got an exclusive offer just for you folks. Limited time only. Get $35 off of their best-selling frame by visiting auraframes.com using the promo code majority at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code majority. This is the best offer of the season, so don't miss out. Terms and conditions apply. Now, back to Emma.
We are back, and let's dive into Kamala Harris's speech last night, which was openly an appeal to the median voter, to the center, to attempting to portray her as a commander-in-chief. And I think we now have a real indication of what the strategy is here. The strategy is that Walz is the progressive messenger, the guy that talks about kitchen table issues, the guy that's allowed to be sentimental because he's a white guy. Kamala Harris took the opportunity last night to dispel some of the perceived weaknesses that she has as a candidate. Now, a lot of this is really conventional thinking that I don't agree with, but I'm giving you the cold hard analysis of what they're thinking. The three things that they're worried about are that she's perceived as too liberal, that she could look soft as a woman, and that immigration and the border is a liability for the Democrats. Now, they've made it a liability, by the way, by completely abandoning the issue and ceding a lot of the framing to the right. And that's the thing I have the biggest problem with. But I maintain that I think that she is going to be as progressive or whatever, or standard Democrat, as whatever the House or Senate majority that she's handed if she wins will be. I think it's more about the party than it is about her. Although I think the strategy is clearly something she's deploying. There's a lot, and Sam was making this point last night, there's a lot tied into being a female candidate, and the speech last night, talking about her prosecutorial record, talking about toughness on the border, being extremely militaristic, which is another reason I think why they didn't have that Palestinian speaker, because talking about ending wars abroad was not the theme they wanted to portray. They wanted her to look like the person who could be the president making the tough decisions. Now, the speech wasn't for us. And I think that's a big part of why there's been a lot of frustration and why last night we were not thrilled with it. But sleeping on it, you can see that that's the strategy, right? And if Biden, who's one of the most historically conservative Democrats in Congress, in the Senate, can be a cipher for a Democratic Party that was pushed in a direction by Bernie Sanders' campaign, and even Elizabeth Warren, honestly, with some of her more technocratic inside game stuff, towards Keynesian economic policies, I certainly think Kamala Harris, who is more progressive than Biden, I mean, that bar is like the floor, in my view, ideologically. But I certainly think that she could continue that legacy economically. But the speech really didn't focus much on economic policy. She didn't focus much on the child tax credit, right? She didn't focus much on the stuff that she had touted in the extremely truncated pre-convention period where she was trying to shore up her base, by saying what her agenda would be to Democrats. And once that was disseminated, she makes her debut, this is their thinking, last night, to a general election audience and to the median voter. Now, we will play later some undecided voters who had very positive opinions about the speech, particularly the immigration piece. And this is just an indication to say, like, this isn't for us. So it's very frustrating, but they're making that kind of calculation that she is going to be the tough cop, the prosecutor, to stave off sexism, and that Walz can be the more empathetic voice for the ticket. Now, she introduced the DNC last night, started with her personal story, but this is how she transitioned her personal story into why she wanted to become a lawyer. And this is the interweaving of her being a woman, but being a tough woman that protects other women. That seemed to be the theme they wanted to craft here.
At a young age, I decided I wanted to do that work. I wanted to be a lawyer. And when it came time to choose the type of law I would pursue, I reflected on a pivotal moment in my life. You see, when I was in high school, I started to notice something about my best friend, Wanda. She was sad at school, and there were times she didn't want to go home. So one day I asked if everything was all right, and she confided in me that she was being sexually abused by her stepfather. And I immediately told her she had to come stay with us, and she did. This is one of the reasons I became a prosecutor, to protect people like Wanda, because I believe everyone has a right to safety, to dignity, and to justice.
So that's a way to use her prosecutorial record, as the advertisements have touted, to say, I go after predators, I go after gangs, I go after big banks. These are general election themes that I do think play to median voters, even though the tough on crime theme is not what I would want in a presidential campaign. However, again, emphasizing this, at least it's not like focusing on criminalizing homeless people, right? I mean, that would have been a really, really right-wing framing. She's attempting to frame it, at the very least here, as seeking justice for people who were wronged. It also plays nicely with the abortion theme, which we'll get to in a little bit. But that's how she talked about her personal story. There's been a lot of discussion about how the public doesn't really know about her background very much. Which is true. I mean, specifically compared to like the Clintons and the Obamas. I mean, these people and the Bidens, these people have been in our cultural, in our shared culture for quite a while, right? So we have a good indication of who they are. This was how she chose to talk about herself to a wide audience. Now, this is when she gets into here some of her work as a prosecutor in Oakland, and begins to shift that personal element into what she says was taking on the big banks and predators, as I just mentioned.
As a young courtroom prosecutor in Oakland, California, I stood up for women and children against predators who abuse them. As Attorney General of California, I took on the big banks, delivered $20 billion for middle-class families who faced foreclosure, and helped pass a homeowner bill of rights, one of the first of its kind in the nation. I stood up for veterans and students being scammed by big for-profit colleges, for workers who are being cheated out of their wages, the wages they were due, for seniors facing elder abuse. I fought against the cartels who traffic in guns and drugs and human beings, who threaten the security of our border and the safety of our communities. And I will tell you, these fights were not easy. And neither were the elections that put me in those offices. We were underestimated at practically every turn. But we never gave up, because the future is always worth fighting for. And that's the fight we are in right now, a fight for America's future. Fellow Americans, Americans, this election is not only the most important of our lives, it is one of the most important in the life of our nation. In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. Consider not only the chaos and calamity when he was in office, but also the gravity of what has happened since he lost the last election.
All right, so we see there how she mentions what she did as a prosecutor. As Attorney General of California, I took on the big banks. She talks about delivering $20 billion for middle-class families who faced foreclosure, helping pass a homeowner bill of rights, the first of its kind in the nation. That's good. In 2008, Kamala Harris was not alone in this, but there were basically no people standing up to the big banks. I mean, the politics of that. Just to compare what we did after COVID to how the stimulus was approached under Obama, which was bailouts for the banks, bailouts for the automakers, not stimulus checks for everyday people. In COVID, that's what we did, right? And that was under Trump first. There was a stimulus check, and then of course Biden continued it when he got into office as well. And the recovery was much quicker. It's not apples to apples, obviously, but most economists that are progressive or just smart understand that the economy would have recovered much more quickly, and perhaps Obama wouldn't have lost 1,000 seats and the Democrats throughout the country in 2010. There was a lot of racist backlash to him getting elected, yes, but in part it was because people were still feeling immiserated after the crash, and it was more about saving business as opposed to saving families. So she was not tough on the big banks, but she did get a settlement, and she did appoint. This was when she was working with Elizabeth Warren on this. Warren was advising because she appointed a monitor for the state for the national mortgage settlement, and that monitor was Katie Porter. Elizabeth Warren seems to have a relationship with Kamala Harris that's positive. Again, these are not Bernie-style politics, but in a continuation of the Biden economic agenda, these are positive signs. So she's touting her toughness again and talking about delivering. I liked the line also about wages and wage theft. She didn't say theft, but cheated out of their wages. And seniors facing abuse. So again, this is a way to talk about who she wants to protect or prioritize in her administration domestically, while also looking like a cop for the independent person. And then she begins to talk about Trump. So let's pick it up where we left off.
Of what has happened since he lost the last election. Donald Trump tried to throw away your votes. When he failed, he sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol, where they assaulted law enforcement officers. When politicians in his own party begged him to call off the mob and send help, he did the opposite. He fanned the flames. And now, for an entirely different set of crimes, he was found guilty of fraud by a jury of everyday Americans and separately found liable for committing sexual abuse. And consider what he intends to do if we give him power again. Consider his explicit intent to set free violent extremists who assaulted those law enforcement officers at the Capitol. His explicit intent to jail journalists, political opponents, and anyone he sees as the enemy. His explicit intent to deploy our active duty military against our own citizens. Consider the power he will have, especially after the United States Supreme Court just ruled that he would be immune from criminal prosecution. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails, and how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States, not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, himself. And we know what a second Trump term would look like. It's all laid out in Project 2025, written by his closest advisors, and its sum total is to pull our country back to the past. But America, we are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back to when Donald Trump tried to cut Social Security and Medicare. We are not going back to when he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, when insurance companies could deny people with pre-existing conditions. We are not going to let him eliminate the Department of Education that funds our public schools. We are not going to let him end programs like Head Start that provide preschool and childcare for our children. America, we are not going back.
We played a longer portion there. We had the part cut out, but I do think that I liked how she made the cop stuff about Trump and about his lawlessness, right? Talking about Project 2025, mentioning Social Security and Medicare and the fact that Republicans want to cut it. I know, shout out to Sam. That's something he wishes that there was more emphasis on. I wish there was more emphasis on that in the speech. But mentioning the Affordable Care Act, I wish we're not going back was also we're going to do X a little bit more, right? Like, okay, Donald Trump does want to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Project 2025 does talk about eliminating the Department of Education. But what is the vision on those two areas that would be one that's more positive, right? Again, the price gouging stuff, the housing platform has been more explicit. But healthcare, there's been a bit of a dearth of detail. Even education, the Walls pick indicated really good things because selecting Shapiro would have been a return to the charter school ghastly period for Democrats. But, Walls is a public school teacher, has a public school teacher's pension. I think that's his literally his retirement. He doesn't have any stocks that he trades, which is incredible. That's a positive indication, but I would like a little bit more on how are we going to strengthen public education in this country for so many people. However, though, again, not for us, still broadly good. But now I think we're going to begin to transition into what do we have next? So it's not foreign policy yet. That we'll get to that in a bit. This was also the abortion section. Here's what she had to say about reproductive rights and repeating the line about heart and home that seems to be a theme for the campaign.
Friends, I believe America cannot truly be prosperous unless Americans are fully able to make their own decisions about their own lives, especially on matters of heart and home. But tonight, in America, too many women are not able to make those decisions. And let's be clear about how we got here. Donald Trump handpicked members of the United States Supreme Court to take away reproductive freedom. And now he brags about it. In his words, quote, "I did it and I'm proud to have done it," end quote. Well, I'll tell you, over the past 2 years, I've traveled across our country, and women have told me their stories. Husbands and fathers have shared theirs. Stories of women miscarrying in a parking lot, developing sepsis, losing the ability to ever again have children, all because doctors are afraid they may go to jail for caring for their patients. Couples just trying to grow their family, cut off in the middle of IVF treatments. Children who have survived sexual assault, potentially being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. This is what's happening in our country because of Donald Trump. And understand, he is not done. As a part of his agenda, he and his allies would limit access to birth control, ban medication abortion, and enact a nationwide abortion ban with or without Congress. And get this, he plans to create a national anti-abortion coordinator and force states to report on women's miscarriages and abortions. Simply put, they are out of their minds.
It was a good line. And she also, when she was mentioning Trump there, talking about the danger, I meant to note that earlier. She called him an unserious man, but that the consequences of putting him in the White House are extremely serious. So you also see that rhetorical pivot from weird to weird but dangerous. That is how they've shifted the campaign. Honestly, you can see how the DNC almost acted like that in the same way, right? The first 2 days featured AOC and Bernie and more, I think, broadly progressive themes. Last night was central. I mean, it was also like Adam Kinzinger, former Republican, spoke for some goddamn reason. You had Leon Panetta, the former CIA director, come out there to talk about Kamala Harris. This was the centrist night. But they still know that abortion is such a salient issue. They are running a safe campaign now. We're in this area where they're going to basically do what the polling said before Biden dropped out, which is that generic Democrat running on these policy sets wins. And she exceeded expectations with the Walls pick, no doubt about it, right? And I think that portends well. But in terms of the strategy, they're doing the generic Democrat thing and trying to cut into the liabilities that she has of being maybe seen as too liberal because of the past support for the Green New Deal, which she walked back, past support for Medicare for All, which she walked back. This is what they're thinking. But abortion, they're not running from that issue because of how we've saw how 2022 played out.
It's obviously this is a little glib, but it's pithy, and I thought it was very funny. Our good friend of the program, Dave from Jamaica, on Twitter last night, basically said something along the lines of like, this speech was sort of like Biden without the cognitive problems or without like the delivery issues, in the sense that like it's mostly hewing to the Biden agenda, but I think the idea for them is like, we've seen the polling knowing that that a lot of people just want a different receptacle for whatever the Biden administration is putting out, just in terms of being.
I think that's fair for every issue except abortion.
Exactly, except abortion, because abortion is a hard charging issue. I think for basically everything else, they're like, let's do no harm by putting out what is broadly popular without the messenger being a complete albatross around our neck.
I mean, it's the same reason why they're not emphasizing her gender or her race, like at all. She didn't mention being the first woman at all.
I'm the first woman. I'm the first black woman. I'm the first South Asian woman.
None of that.
It's not. We're not going with as much with the change campaign language as like an Obama or Hillary, obviously, or even Hillary's speech at this DNC.
Well, I mean, Hillary epitomizes the me generation more than anybody. I mean, she can't stop talking about herself, even when it's supposed to be about Kamala Harris. That's something I've deeply appreciated from Harris, because I think, younger generations, too, of activists don't value representation or use it as cynically as, say, Biden did. I mean, I don't think Biden really truly treated Kamala Harris like a partner. And I'm being almost too generous when I say that, because the reporting is that he basically blocked her from from everything. I mean, he used her cynically as a part of his promise to select a black woman to the ticket. But I think, it's quite clear based on the reporting that she was not intimately involved in his decision making. He sidelined her because he felt she was threatening to a degree. So the point is just that I'm not actually sure where I'm.
Well, I just wanted to piggyback off what you
Yes.
said. The other thing about that is that before this year, before kind of, or even honestly before June 27th of this year, Biden basically gave Kamala the intractable issue set, in the sense of
even the border stuff. So she wasn't the border czar,
right? But even kind of being like, you need to figure out the antecedents of the border problem, and kind of like negotiate and figure out how to disrupt the flow from the Northern Triangle of in Central America. An intractable issue that has not been able to be salient or winning for either party for literally 40 years, probably. Abortion, which obviously is very much salient now, but sort of like navigating the Supreme Court. Artificial intelligence, like these things that honestly, for the most part, voting rights, like with the kind of understanding that the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, I don't fully remember the names of them, the John Lewis one and the other big voting rights package. Implicitly, we absolutely know that none of that will be passed without the filibuster. So whether it was intentional or not, Biden was giving her essentially tasks that were not going to be fixed with a vice president's hand.
Okay, you're right. You're 100% right. I mean, I think that of course he was doing that intentionally.
Yeah, no,
he was outsourced. He was
right.
He wanted to solidify his position to run for a second term, even
and be
with
like,
his
listen,
age issue. Yeah,
and be like, listen, like she has a lot on her plate. We're giving her a lot to do, but you're giving her a lot to do that you kind of know she cannot actually really affect in a way definitively.
And that's what I lost my train of thought, but I meant to say she's taken an entirely different approach with Walz, where she wants him to be a governing partner, right? And that is
exactly
encouraging and shows that like a lot less ego than Joe Biden. Although it's hard not to show less ego than Joe Biden. So the point about abortion also is just that Biden apparently thought that his moderate position on abortion was what won the Democrats in 2022, which is him basically not talking about it and saying that he's uncomfortable with abortion as a Catholic. He didn't agree to Elizabeth Warren's request to have federal lands conduct abortions for people in states where it was restricted. And Biden's stupid ass advisors were apparently telling him, oh, that's why Democrats did well and there was no red wave in 2022. No, it wasn't running from the issue on that front. It was the fact that that issue carried people over the top, carried Democrats. And in spite of you, buddy, in spite of you. And Harris's surge has been entirely reflective of that. So that's also a little bit why, I don't envy a lot of the things that she has to overcome with Biden being this albatross around her neck as this extremely unpopular incumbent and lame duck who also kind of screwed her over. It's the same thing Cuomo did with the actually incompetent Kathy Hochul. It's just that Harris is more talented and by a lot than Hochul. But Hochul might be the least talented Democrat in America.
Yeah, potentially one of the worst retail politicians with some of the worst instincts, maybe in the country, potentially in the world.
Yeah. We don't want to be hyperbolic, but
an
it's
almost world historically bad politician. Like the one I hate Andrew Cuomo for a number of reasons. He was right with that strategy, though.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it
the
backfired.
self-serving nature of it. Yes,
he was right with the self-serving. Exactly, it backfired because he himself is a
terrible
alleged
person.
sexual predator. But
Yeah.
like, it would have worked if he was could have been normal for 2 seconds.
Exactly. But let's get to the foreign policy piece here. This is. I mentioned the border stuff and how she talked tough about this, but that's been on the campaign trail. So this stuff was new. Again, the whole commander-in-chief thing, right? Like, I can lead our country to prosperity and against our enemies, and I'll stand strong and I'll talk tough to Putin. She feels she has to overcome that as a woman. And she feels she has to overcome that given her relative lack of experience as it relates to foreign policy, right? I mean, I think that's part of why. What was she on? Was she on the Intelligence Committee when she got into the Senate? I think that's exactly right. Yeah. I'm 90% sure that it was intelligence. So those are the kinds of things that you try to shore up when you want to pad your resume on that front, but still, she was not in the Senate for a long time at all before she became vice president. So this is her trying to talk tough for people. She mentions Ukraine at the beginning here, but then she does talk about Gaza. I'll give you my thoughts on that in just a second.
Vice President, I have confronted threats to our security, negotiated with foreign leaders, strengthened our alliances, and engaged with our brave troops overseas. As Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world.
Look, wait, pause it for a
And
second.
I will
Go back because someone pointed this out. I guess it was Ashley Reese on Twitter. That's the one thing Ella Emhoff didn't clap for. Our queen, who posted an UNRWA fundraiser and then had to delete it because the New York Post
always
ratted her
has
out.
the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world.
Yeah, just go a second more. Okay, so you can see Ella's not clapping. We love her. She was boisterous throughout the
What,
rest
Mom?
of it, cheering her on. Come on, Mamala.
You're embarrassing me.
I mean, what a legend. We stand Ella Emhoff in this house. Okay, all right. Keep going.
And I will fulfill our sacred obligation to care for our troops and their families, and I will always honor and never disparage their service and their sacrifice. I will make sure that we lead the world into the future on space and artificial intelligence, that America, not China, wins the competition for the 21st century, and that we strengthen, not abdicate, our global leadership.
This is very Biden.
Trump, on the other hand, threatened to abandon NATO. He encouraged Putin to invade our allies, said Russia could, quote, do whatever the hell they want. 5 days before Russia attacked Ukraine, I met with President Zelensky to warn him about Russia's plan to invade. I helped mobilize a global response, over 50 countries, to defend against Putin's aggression. President, I will stand strong with Ukraine and our NATO allies.
Biden's crying right now that he didn't get to mention NATO. I've been scared.
With respect to the war in Gaza, President Biden and I are working around the clock. because now is the time to get a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done. And let me be clear, I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, and I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself, because the people of Israel must never again face the horror that a terrorist organization called Hamas caused on October 7th. Including unspeakable sexual violence and the massacre of young people at a music festival. At the same time, what has happened in Gaza over the past 10 months is devastating. So many innocent lives lost. Desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety over and over again. The scale of suffering is heartbreaking. President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination. And know this, I will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to defend our forces and our interests against Iran and Iran-backed terrorists. I will not cozy up to tyrants and dictators like Kim Jong-un who are rooting for Trump.
Okay, you know who else is rooting for Trump is Benjamin Netanyahu, who is really openly attempting to sabotage the Democrats from getting reelected, because, again, Donald Trump has promised Miriam Adelson in exchange for $100 million to a super PAC, literally, according to reporting, that he'll let Israel annex the West Bank and just basically entirely ethnically cleanse / genocide the Palestinian people if he gets into office. And he's so untethered from anything that's connected to real people that he's literally made Israel support central to his campaign because he's just begging for money. He's begging for AIPAC money. That's what he's been reduced to. But you just see the trade-off that she made there. She's like, I know I need to say Palestinian self-determination. So let me just now also do the gratuitous sexual violence thing, which has been heavily disputed. I mean, the systemic nature of the sexual violence. I don't think it's a stretch to say that sexual violence occurred on October 7th. That's not shocking at all. But we know that the reporting from the Times was propagandistic and based on the thinnest sourcing I've ever seen. Secondhand anecdotes with an inexperienced Israeli filmmaker fishing for stories in that area. And no mention of the actual systemic sexual violence in Israeli torture camps, where they literally raped a Palestinian prisoner to death and have been raping them. I mean, so she makes that comment as a bone. It's a gratuitous bone, right, to the Israel lobby before she dares to mention Palestinians. I don't know if that's your assessment of it, Bradley, but that's what it felt like to me, to mention that, because God forbid on a national stage she talks about Palestinian self-determination.
Yeah, it's interesting because it was so jarring to hear some of like kind of the screams without words framework be like a Nat Schwartz New York Times piece that was like very, very, as you were saying, heavily disputed by Ryan Grimm's reporting in The Intercept, as well as like kind of the framing of like Sheryl Sandberg's documentary about the violence on October 7th. It was very much in that kind of like that vein of sort of the claims of what happened being so like kind of barbaric that to make it so that it was almost impossible to refute, because even trying to like refute something like that is like, oh my god, you were saying
offensive.
that it's offensive that you even try and clarify that it happened, so it happened. It happened, okay? I think there's literally a clip in Sheryl Sandberg's movie where she's like, "It happened," okay? But I saw it, even though literally there are many different spokespeople from like the Israeli insurance agency, the Israeli government's military spokespeople have refuted some of this, or just said they're not aware of what Biden or whoever was referring to then go into sort of the more technocratic, like, Palestinians deserve security and prosperity, and because like it's interesting to go from like such a almost cerebral and like visceral reminiscence, not reminiscence in like a positive or nostalgic way, but like a recounting of October 7th,
right,
to then kind of very bloodlessly being like, it's horrible what's going on in Gaza, and they deserve security and whatever the other adjectives or whatever the other kind of like signifiers that she used, because that, despite supposedly nodding towards some sort of policy when it comes to Palestine, is still very nebulous. It's still very vague.
Extremely
vague. What does security mean? What does self-determination mean for the Palestinians? Who is responsible for their security? Who is responsible for their self-determination? What does it look like? And is it what the U.S. wants that to look like, or is it what Palestine wants that to look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And again, the ceasefire without an arms embargo is an anachronism, because you can't be trying to work for a ceasefire while also sending weapons to a belligerent actor that is committing a genocide. That was gratuitous, but was a mention of Palestinian self-determination. Alex Salmon noted that on Twitter, and we're going to have him on next week because he went to an event, a Zionist event at the DNC, where he observed them feeling anxious about Harris. I mean, I think that just like the fact that she's not Biden probably freaks them out a little bit, given the fact that the protest movement is so reasonable. And at some level and at some point, it needs to be sooner, but at some point, the dam will have to break and the Democrats are going to have to change policy. And it's just a matter of how many people die to get to that point. And it's already been beyond unacceptable. That was difficult to watch. I was happy to hear her mention Palestinian self-determination. Frankly, it's better than just repeating the ceasefire line, which is what AOC did. There was at least a mention to the suffering, even if it's in passive voice. I don't think we learned anything new, honestly, with that. That's the thing. I think we're exactly where we were beforehand. But it should be notable that it was the biggest applause line, probably. One of the bigger applause lines that she got. Their cold-hearted assessment is they think that this is not an issue that's going to sway the election for them enough to risk AIPAC money being flooded into Trump's coffers, or even liberal Zionist organizations and big money bundlers like Chaim Saban and other folks that Biden had been fundraising with. They're playing it extremely safe as it relates to these enormously powerful institutions that she feels could hurt her electorally. And that's the thing. Yeah, right. Hoagie writes in, telling that Harris didn't attribute the devastation in Gaza to anyone. I mean, that's exactly right. Like, that's the language that is encouraged when talking about Palestinians. They don't say Palestine ever, too, right? We played that clip yesterday of Nancy Pelosi stopping herself short of saying Palestine. She says Palestinian people, because that would imply statehood. And that would imply that Palestine was a place before Israel colonized it. So those are the kinds of things that Democrats engage in, and it's nonsense. It's nonsense. So happy that she mentioned Palestinian self-determination, but overall, that was really nothing new. And very similar to what we've been hearing from Biden, which is what Sam and I have said is likely going to happen in terms of what she promises or doesn't promise heading into the election. Now, with all of that said, let's turn to a focus group that CNN conducted, Gary Tuchman, in Allentown, Pennsylvania, with undecided voters. They asked her here to grade the speech, give it an A, give it a B, etc. This is how they responded, and I just think it's telling because I did not like that speech. It was overly militaristic. It was focused on criminalization and prosecution and border security. I mean, it's a centrist, center-right. In many ways, some of the focus on that stuff, the abortion piece and other elements of it were good, but she's trying to look tough. She doesn't want to be tagged as a soft woman or as too liberal, and that was clearly the tactic. Walls can be soft and talk about policy and family, and she can come out and look tough. And by the way, not dissimilar from Biden being the more conservative figure and her being perceived as more liberal as his VP, although I think there are differences here and improvements. But the reality is that this focus group reacted really positively.
First thing I want to ask you, I want you to grade the speech, okay? A is excellent, B above average, C average, D below average. We all know what F is. Let's start with you. How do you grade the speech?
I gave her a B plus.
B.
B plus.
A.
B plus.
A.
C.
C. So mostly A's and B's with one C. I want to ask you why you made the decision you made. First of all, we start with Scott, who is the president of the UAW local here in the Lehigh Valley. Scott, what grade did you give it again?
B plus.
How come?
I gave her the high grade because I thought she looked very confident. I liked how she spoke from her heart. I liked her message of unity and the division that we have in America. I like her fight for the middle class and families. The reason I didn't give her an A was I thought she needed to go into a little more detail on some of her plans, of how she would, do some of the things that she envisioned.
Okay, Lindsay, you're in sales. You're the person who wasn't sure she was going to vote for anybody because you don't like either of these two candidates. I'll ask you more about that in a minute, but first, what grade did you give the speech?
I gave it a B.
How come?
I thought it was a good speech. I mean, she did what she was supposed to do. I liked that she was talked about her upbringing, made it feel a little more personal. But yeah, I thought it was a good speech.
Okay, Andy, you're also with the UAW. You make cars and trucks for us Americans, so thank you for that, along with the rest of you. Your grade again was?
B plus.
And how come B plus?
I liked her plan for the middle class. My wife's a nurse. I'm an auto worker. I'm as middle class as you can get. I just felt like she should go a little more in depth, but I guess I understand you can't really go as in depth in these speeches, but a little bit more would have been nice.
Okay, Donna is your mother.
Yes.
Donna's a retired dental hygienist. Donna, what grade did you give it again?
I gave her an A.
And how come an A?
Because she hit all the points that I wanted to know about. I wanted to know more about her economic policies, her foreign policy. I know she couldn't go into depth about that, but I mean, I felt that she looked very presidential. She sounded presidential, and I think she's going to be a unifier.
Yeah, by the way, going into tonight, Andy was 60-40 with Kamala Harris.
Yes.
You were 50-50, which is interesting. We'll talk more about that in a second. Patrick, also with the UAW. Grade you gave it again?
A B plus.
How come B plus?
Well, she was very confident in what she was saying. She showed leadership ability and understanding of the topics at hand. But again, she didn't go in depth. I did like what she said about what she's going to try to do for the middle class, about a tax break for us, which will be very nice, but still a little bit more information on some of the things that she's planning on doing.
Sean, also with the UAW. The grade you gave it again?
I gave her an A.
How come?
I was looking for policy information. I really wanted to see some substantive policy information. I thought she did give enough. I like what she gave on military, what she wants to do for our veterans, and with border control. I just think that she has a lot of good ideas, and she's very well spoken. I think she was very professional.
Sabrina is.
So those were the reasonings given here. It's hard for us to understand. Anybody listening to this or watching this, you're very engaged in politics for the most part. I'm very engaged in politics. I can't imagine being undecided on this at all, right? I mean, it's difficult, I think, for us to get into some of that in that mindset when you're more politically engaged. They seem to have a positive reaction to this. Sam and I were chatting about this a little bit this morning. I know he's on vacation, but that's a case in point. We're obsessed with this stuff, right? And we care more about moving the country forward in a progressive direction, and having a negative reaction to that speech doesn't necessarily mean that undecided voters are going to have a reaction. So they gave their grades, and then CNN follows up at the end and asks them who they're going to vote for. Again, there are 7 members of this focus group, or 8, I think. I'm not exactly sure. 8. And he goes through and asks if this has changed their mind. We'll see what they say.
Like I said, none of you were ready to make a commitment to any candidate in November. Please raise your hand right now if you're now ready to make a commitment after today. Wow. I'm just kind of surprised about it. We haven't rehearsed this. I'm going to make that very clear. I will attest to this. 7 of you are now ready. Scott?
Yes, I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris.
Andy?
Yeah, Kamala Harris, yes.
Yes,
Donna?
I'm voting for her also.
Sean? Sean?
Yes, Kamala.
Sabrina?
Kamala.
Patrick?
Kamala.
Brian?
Trump.
Trump? And finally, Lindsay.
Still probably not voting.
So probably you don't like either of them.
Nope.
Okay.
What led to you all making a decision? Was it that decisive of an evening, Scott?
Yeah, I really, as I said before, I really liked her confidence. She's really seemed presidential. She seemed very confident. Like I said, she spoke from her heart. I liked how she filled you in on her background, that she struggled, her mother struggled,
all right.
Middle class family.
Donna, you were 50-50 going into the evening. What made you make a decision?
Well, I've been doing research since she was, the nominee, and I like what I'm reading. And here, I've been watching the convention, and her speech was just, that just sold me.
And Brian, you decided on Trump. What about tonight? Because when we met last week, you were undecided. What about tonight made you decide you were going to vote for Trump?
Her speech was great. I like how she went into personal history again. It was just not moving for me.
But it made you think that Trump's a better candidate than her.
He's here for it. He's a little bit more aggressive. She's aggressive in her way, but I think she'll be aggressive in the next term.
So Trump over Harris for you, Harris over Trump for most of you. What I will tell you, 75 days now.
Okay, so look, take with that what you will. It's a CNN focus group. You can't run to the bank with it. But it is interesting and notable. You saw like that guy who gave it an A and is voting for her at the top was particularly pleased about the border thing. And it's like, dude, you're in Pennsylvania. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to say about that, right? The
famous border state, Pennsylvania.
Right. It's not exactly what I would think would be at the top of the priority list there, but just a sobering reminder of what a general election constitutes. And I think we've been in such a crazy period of upheaval and of agony about Gaza, and of that short kind of period where Harris was rolling out some of the more progressive things for the base, solidifying that quite strategically. And there's a question mark about the sincerity, right? But then moving to the convention and announcing herself on the national stage as a much different, I think, candidate than she'd been campaigning when she goes to her stops and talks about the child tax credit, or goes to the UAW and speaks about collective bargaining and those kinds of things. I mean, did she mention union? She did a little bit, but it certainly wasn't the focus. The focus was, I'm commander-in-chief, I'm tough enough to do the job, I'll crack down on the border, I'll crack down on dictators, I'll be a strong person on the international stage, and that's what a lot of voters want. They want a commander-in-chief. And that was part of what hurt Biden, That's the thing people, still underplay about Biden, is that it wasn't the Democrats, right? It was about this very baseline desire from voters, which is like, I want a guy who's going to do the job, who's competent. And he didn't pass the smell test, given the fact that he was unable to communicate during that debate and had a bit of a breakdown, and because of his age. And those concerns persisted. It's about doing the job, right, for some of these voters. And for that focus group, at the very least, they seem to think that she could. With that said, we are going to wrap up the first hour of this program, and we'll head into the fun half now. Folks, this show relies on your support. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. We have, just 70 days around that until the election. We're close to it. So we'll be providing you coverage Monday through Friday of all of the important events, all the stuff that you need to know. We'll talk more about Gaza in the fun half. We'll talk about the antitrust suit against the real estate software company that's been jacking up rent prices. We'll cover Trump in the fun half, his freak out about Kamala Harris, and more. So if you become a member, you have access to the fun half every time, not just when we're live. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. We're an independent outlet, and we rely on your support to keep us going and giving you real, honest coverage about all of this. Bradley, do you have a sense of what's happening on Left Reckoning?
So let's see here. They were live on Tuesday, David and Matt. They spoke with David Griscom actually last night just did an Ask Me Anything stream. So check it out if you want to just hear a little mailbag type thing from Griscom. 2 days ago on Tuesday, they spoke with Elias Cepeda to get an update on what was happening on the ground in Chicago with the DNC. And Matt and David also gave their take on what they've seen so far from the DNC as well. So a little bit of their take on Left Reckoning. So go to youtube.com/Left Reckoning if you'd like to check those out, and go to patreon.com/Left Reckoning if you'd like to access the post game for them.
Okay. And on ESPN, we talked a little bit about the NFL preseason, our thoughts on the quarterbacks and the rookies making their debuts, some not as kind thoughts on Daniel Jones and what's happening with the Giants. But then we also talked about the WNBA, Caitlin Clark breaking the assist record. Next Monday, we'll have a fantasy football preview. So if everybody hasn't drafted yet, tune in to our coverage, 4 p.m. on Monday. Bradley and I will give some fantasy tips and talk a little bit about who we like in the draft this year. So youtube.com/ESPN show for that. The number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is it?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello? Is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single frickin' day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Who libertarians? They're so stupid though. Common sense says, of course.
gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge met.
I'm positively quivering. I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35 501 1/2 3/8
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
6, 5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.
We are back, folks. We will open up the phone line soon. I just don't want to keep people waiting. We'll read some IMs, then we'll get to some clips. Jimbo Dimbo Vance. That's got to be it. I believe she cares about social justice. I think so too.